heybk with Ofer Cohen.
The crazy part about it was it didn't stop. It just kept on going and getting bigger and better. And it's very similar to like today in Brooklyn. Like people like, is Brooklyn tapped out? I'm like, nope. I get a little upset when people kind of knock what's happened over the past 20-something years, because folks, I don't think you really understand what it was like.
On today's episode, I spoke to a good friend, a hipster before there were even hipsters in Williamsburg, and a true visionary. Dave Maundrell.
How are you?
Doing amazing.
Thanks for having me in.
Absolutely. Dave and I talked in our Terra CRG studio in Prospect Heights on what happened to be the third anniversary of the sale of his real estate firm, Apartments and Lofts. That's kind of a big deal. We didn't really plan it.
No. No, we didn't.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
And I remember how emotional that moment was for you.
When you have a vision and you really truly have a dream and you're able to make it happen, to see over, those 13 years, the company growing. And I really didn't, when you're so immersed in this, in your business or with anything you do, sometimes you really don't know how well you're doing, in terms of like, touching people and your impact on an industry or in our case, a marketplace. And then I would say maybe like 2012-ish, some really big players started saying, wow, you're killing it. I was like, where you been, man? I've been killing it for a long time. But and that was just like kind of like mind blowing a little bit for me.
Right.
Some of the people who have been on the podcast have said this to me.
After the sale, Dave took on his new role at Citi Habitats as Executive Vice President of Brooklyn and Queens. Dave launched Apartments and Lofts back in 2002. It was the early days of Williamsburg's transformation. Ups and Lofts quickly grew, becoming one of the most successful privately owned brokerage firms throughout New York City. Dave was early in using the web and social media to complement what is really a face-to-face business. Eventually, he made his mark designing and building new developments.
My mission was to buck the trend of the shady real estate broker. And people really kind of started to attract to the brand I was building.
When Dave started the company, he was working for his uncle selling insurance in Queens. He became a real estate broker on the side in his home turf in Williamsburg.
I would cold call people from the Village Voice and for apartments that had apartments for rent by owner.
Right.
And then I would meet them after work, like at 6, 7 o'clock, get the listing, and just persistence kept going.
This was before the Williamsburg rezoning. This was mostly loft conversions, somewhat illegal.
I don't think iPhone was out yet. I don't think there was any podcasts at that time, But yeah, it was a different world. I mean, Williamsburg at that time, the waterfront was still undeveloped. And there was still the devil worshippers and the graffiti artists and the prostitutes and all that, trash down in the waterfront. That's now the Edge and where Smorgasburg is, that's 184 Kent, and all those projects are. So it was a different time. We had to, you had to watch your back going to your car at night, at times, and it was a different world. But I was used to it. I was accustomed to it because that's where I grew up, and so it really didn't faze me much.
Dave first noticed a change in the late 90s. Artists and hipsters ventured across the river to Bedford Avenue on the L train from Manhattan. They started moving in, renting lofts in old factory buildings.
I come home from work. I would go to school, come home, head to the city, go to work, get there at 2, 3 o'clock, work till 9 o'clock at night, and then take the L train back home. And back then, everyone stayed at the back of the L train. I lived on the second stop on the L, on the Varma stop. And the reason why everyone congregated in the last car was because that's where the 24-hour entrances were in the last car, 1, and 2. Everyone stayed together because it was dangerous.
Right.
But so what would happen is I'd be on the train at 9, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night coming back home from work, and I started seeing people from the East Village out in Williamsburg. I started seeing people with purple hair and pink hair and leather jackets coming out of the city into Brooklyn at that time. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? So eventually what started happening was places started opening up in Williamsburg. There was Planet Thailand. There was the original Galapagos. There was Veracruz, which is a Mexican place. Planet Thai used to be this small little storefront on Bedford in North 7th. I think it's Uniqlo now.
Right.
And that's crazy. And they made the best spicy basil chicken. Oh, it was like fire, and it was like my introduction to, Thai food at that time, and I started, just hanging out in Williamsburg and seeing it change and change, and it became. Then what would happen is many times we'd go out and hang out in the East Village, and then we'd finish the night in Williamsburg because I still lived there at the time, and we'd be, at a punk band dive bar. It was called Sweetwater on North 6th Street, at 3 a.m, drinking shots of, Jameson, with a bunch of people who look like the Ramones from the 70s, and just, and I was like, this is really happening here, man. And and the crazy part about it was, it didn't stop. It just kept on going and getting bigger and better. And it's very similar to like today in Brooklyn. Like people like, is Brooklyn tapped out? I'm like, nope. It just keeps growing and pushing deeper in, and it's there's all different opinions on what's happened to Brooklyn, but I get a little upset when people kind of knock what's happened over the past 20-something years, because folks, I don't think you really understand what it was like in Brooklyn in the 80s, and even in the 90s, but like when I was growing up here, 85, 86, I mean, no one knew where Williamsburg was. And the only time people in high school knew where Williamsburg was if I told them, I go, you ever hear of Peter Luger? And they'd be like, yes. I go, you ever hear of the Williamsburg Bridge? And they'd be like, yeah. I go, right there. Oh, everyone thought that Brooklyn was Bay Ridge, Bensonhurst. And that went through its own, transformation, in terms of demographics as well. I feel like, I'm glad I was able to see the neighborhood I grew up in, which I promise you, no one knew what the heck Williamsburg was. And if you knew Williamsburg, you thought about burning cars on the streets and gangs and heavy drugs and I'm serious about the burning cars on the street on Bedford Avenue on the South Side and such. And I was able to kind of live through that, and as a kid, and then participate in the transformation of the neighborhood. While finding a career somehow. So kind of like, I look back at it now and I'm like, how did I get to where I am today as a person and as a, businessman? It's like everything has made me who I am today. And so I'm proud of, being able to kind of make it through all that, finding my niche in an industry that I love, that I just stumbled across it just because of living.
What are the things that you miss the most in Williamsburg of the old days?
Oh man, what do I miss? I used to love seeing my grandfather on the corner with his quote-unquote boys hanging out, in front of the pizzeria, and these guys are getting, they're not getting pizza, these old guys, they were getting coffee, espresso, and then little do you know, there's like, these pizzerias, they have a little secret sauce, let's say, for people in the know, that they put into those coffees. People don't know that, and when you're a kid, you have no idea, and then when you get a little older and it gets offered to you, you're like, whoa.
Just give us a geographic.
So I grew up on Consulier, or in today's world, Consigliere, but we all called it Consulier in Larmer Street. So Larmer and Metro was a hub because the L train was there. Second stop Larmer, because remember, no one ever got off at Bedford. Bedford was a ghost town. I miss a really good, authentic Brooklyn slice of pizza. None of this thin crust.
There's no more slice. There's no more slice. I was just talking about it with someone.
Come on, I miss that.
It's all thin crust with arugula on top.
Yeah,
at best.
Listen, it's good, but it's if you put that fancy $46 pizza with truffle on the right side, and you put a plain regular slice from San Marco Pizzeria in Williamsburg, I'll take the San Marco slice all day, every day. I miss that. I miss graffiti on the trains.
While he's proud of his work converting lofts, Dave describes the emotions in the early days. It was the end of an era. Mom and pop factories were becoming obsolete.
I can't tell you how many of those folks I met with, and you saw like the tears they were holding back talking to me, because a lot of them were doing was keeping their whatever's left of their business on the ground floor, and then slowly moving people in above. And it was quote unquote work live, and AIR was at, with some buildings, but not a lot. And it was just really kind of like, I remember those experiences. I remember one a guy was on Thames, and having and seeing his eyes welling up, because his business, his family business, and all he knew as a person is dying, and he has to make this move. And it's also extremely risky because one, the financial investment, they were using whatever they had to do it. And that's how it started. I mean, these people were doing it for survival. And then it became a real business.
Dave Maundrell soon took his knack for marketing and began developing and designing new buildings in Brooklyn. He was introduced to Louis Silverman, who bought the waterfront for his family's truck leasing company.
Not just a piece of the waterfront, all of the waterfront.
Right.
Selling a piece
before
back. Before the rezoning, then selling a piece back to the state. I mean, a masterful deal. And Louis eventually became, he's one of my mentors, personally and professionally. And love that guy. And he called me up one day. He goes, listen, I'm thinking about developing one of my properties on Broadway. It was 20 Broadway. He saw I was a hustler and worker. I had no experience doing this at that time. He goes, okay, send me a proposal. Then I was like, oh, man, I don't have a proposal. So I wish he took weeks and looked at other firms' proposals, and I came up with my own spin to it. At the time, my wife was a graphic designer. And I said, I'm going to go in, I'm going to wow this guy. So I go into the pitch after he's meeting with other companies. And I go, do me a favor. Can you type into your computer BroadwayRiverview.com? And he looks at me and he does it. And his jaw drops. He turns around and goes, what is this? I go, that's what I'm going to do for you. So basically I went, bought the domain.
Right.
Created a website with a logo and everything for him, which eventually that logo actually was the one that was chosen.
But this was the first time you did it, and then you developed some kind of a model around it.
Yeah, and kind of people were because we were so entrenched in that marketplace, we really learned what people wanted. I was still very young in my career. I had to learn a lot. I learned from all different sources, from architects, from listening at meetings, and not pretending to know something, learning. And I was lucky to be around some really, really smart people, and I absorbed it all. And then, and you just keep building and building upon it. But at the end of the day, I always knew who the demographic was. And then I became hell-bent on not being known as just a Williamsburg broker after that.
Right.
And branching out to other marketplaces, which we've been able to do.
Dave has since worked on new development projects from Mott Haven to Staten Island. As the so-called Brooklyn brand expands, Dave says he's tried to respect the history and the people in the neighborhoods.
I think one thing that I'm very proud of is being able to respect the folks who are there, who were there, and convey that messaging when we're in the design process regarding facades. And some of these buildings are very loud and kind of really like, people's, trophies to themselves, developers or architects and such like that. And I've learned that you need to be a little more contextual and kind of respectful in a lot of places, not everywhere. Like across the street here, in this neighborhood, it was an open, it was a blank canvas. And you have a lot of marketplaces like that, or blank canvases.
Not as much context, right?
But what happens is, it starts out as a blank canvas, and a bunch of developers are doing their own thing. And then when you go back and look at it 20 years later, you're like, oh man, this is ugly. This building's green, this building's orange. Like what the heck is going on here? So it's not as cool anymore. I think the Brooklyn, it's everywhere. I mean, like, it's done, so to speak. It's like what we've been, and it's been done for a long time. And we've been trying to do different spins to that and kind of use that as a base. But it comes down to style. People will pay for style. People will pay for amenities that are practical. But style sells. We'll just, and we've taken that philosophy. I've applied it to Long Island City. And when we've done it there, we've done off the charts. What do people want? And then there's that balancing act between what the people want and what we can afford, because we have to make, it has to make money or it's not going anywhere. I want what we can build. Let's put something there that makes sense. And I also tell clients, I'm going to guide you not to make decisions where you tell me I have to raise the rents higher than I think I can achieve.
One last question is, tell me something nobody knows about Dave Maundrell.
Oh, man. Ooh. Personally or professionally or either?
Personally.
I'm super loyal. Super loyal. Loyal to a fault.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
You know, there's been too many times that I've said to myself over the past 5 years, oh man, I'm in the wrong business. This business, real estate business, not just brokerage. Brokerage is another beast. Real estate business is really cutthroat and tough, and people are really out for themselves. And when you have a good heart and a good soul, you have to protect yourself from this, because I guess I'm going through my, fifth market swing, sixth market swing potentially, since, being in this business. So I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, the downright wrong that people do.
No, I can completely relate to that notion. I mean, I've been struggling myself with this idea of, how to continue to be kind with so much hostility around me. And because the real estate business can bring a lot of raw behaviors from people, because there's a lot of money.
You just gotta keep true to your own ideals, and family helps. Us having kids,
Right.
It changes your perspective on things. I have a great girlfriend who's also in the business, who understands kind of how it works and is very supportive. And surrounding yourself with people who are supportive of, who you are and your kind of, your core values is the only way to really do it, I think.
Dave Maundrell, thank you so much.
Thank you. You've gotten good at this, dude.
You're listening to Hey BK, the podcast about the people behind Brooklyn's transformation. You can find us at heybk.nyc or wherever you get your podcast. Please download and subscribe to all our episodes. I'm Ofer Cohen. Thanks for listening.